Hello everyone and welcome back to Click Theory 2.0. In the last video, we introduced the basic metronome settings and we looked at a preliminary exercise to get comfortable with this new idea of moving the metronome to different parts of the beat. So today we're going to add the element of space. So in the preliminary exercise, it's easy to keep track of the metronome when we're playing all of the subdivisions within a beat. And once we start to take away some notes, it's up to us to feel the pulse in all of the subdivisions in order to play accurately in time. So how do we do this? Well, the way I see it, the metronome isn't a clicking box that you adjust to. It can become another rhythmic component in the music. So it's what we're playing in relation to the metronome that determines how accurate we are. So think of the metronome as another musician in the room that you're trying to play with and not against or for. So in order to get comfortable with space and the metronome and all of the subdivisions, let's take a look at how different rhythms relate or interact with the metronome. So in a 16th note subdivision, or what I'll call a duple subdivision, there are 15 possible rhythmic combinations of 1, 2, 3, and 4 notes. So our one-note phrases we could play on the downbeat, the E, the and, or the For two notes, we could play one E, E and one and E For the three-note phrases, we can play one E and one and one E And of course, four-note phrases is one E and all of the notes within a beat. And you could actually find that written out in the downloadable PDF in the description below. So with these particular rhythms combined with a particular metronome setting, you'll find that sometimes you'll align with the metronome and sometimes you'll play independently of the metronome. And so it's important to feel what I call the composite rhythms, or the combination of what you're playing and what the metronome is doing, so that you can hear where all the subdivisions are and where your placement relates to what the metronome is doing. So this section is designed to develop your relationship to the pulse and the subdivisions while using the metronome to kind of explore other parts of the beat and how what you're playing can interact with it. So let's take a look at all the composite rhythms that are created by each of the rhythmic combinations, and let's say the basic metronome setting number 2, which is on the and. Okay, so if we were to look at the one-note phrases with the metronome on the and, if we're playing on the downbeat and the metronome is on the and, then the composite rhythm created between the two are eighth notes. If we're playing on the E, then it's E and. If we're playing on the and, well, we're actually playing with the metronome in unison, so the composite rhythm is just on the and. And if we're playing on the composite rhythm is and. So in the handout, which you'll find in the description, you'll actually see all 15 rhythmic combinations notated with basic metronome setting number 1, which is on the downbeat. And you'll see the composite rhythms that are created between the rhythm and the metronome. Now, what's interesting is that some rhythms will actually align with the metronome really well, or it'll be completely independent from the metronome. And actually, some pairs of rhythms will have the same composite rhythm, because sometimes you may be playing with the metronome and sometimes you may be playing off of the metronome. But for those instances where the composite rhythms are the same, it's important to make them feel exactly the same. And this is where we can see the benefit of using the metronome in this way. So practice the 15 possible rhythmic combinations using all of the basic metronome settings, and you could do these in two ways. You can practice each one individually, or you can practice them sequentially with form. So I'm going to demonstrate another metronome setting with each rhythm played 4 times each. Now, when you start to practice these rhythmic combinations, you might feel like there's a very large gap between the preliminary exercise that we did in the last video and this, which is totally understandable because, again, we're adding a lot of space now to the music. Now, before, we should be very, very comfortable playing that preliminary hand exercise with all the different metronome settings so that we can feel and be comfortable with the metronome on, say, the E or the or the and. And if you find that adding space is more challenging, then what you can do is you can actually add the subdivisions back into the exercise and then play each rhythmic combination as accents. So actually, this is just a good exercise for accent control, but I'll demonstrate playing the rhythmic combinations as accents while playing all the 16th notes with one of the basic metronome settings. So if you're practicing this exercise sequentially and you're finding that some of them are a little trickier, go back and practice those individual rhythms by themselves and then try to reincorporate them back into the sequential exercise. And with all of these exercises, but especially with this one, it's important to physically feel comfortable when we do the exercise. It's one thing to play it correctly, but it's another thing to play it correctly and feel comfortable and confident as we do it. So far we've only looked at rhythms in a duple subdivision. And we can apply the same techniques and exercises to a ternary or triplet subdivision. So like before, there are 7 possible rhythmic combinations in a ternary subdivision using 1, 2, and 3 notes. With one-note phrases, we can do the downbeat, the second partial of the triplet, and the third partial of the triplet. For 2-note phrases, we can do the first and the second and the third, and the first and the third. And of course, 3 notes is all 3 triplets. So since we're in a new subdivision, we have to have new metronome settings to accompany the new subdivision. And there are 3 ternary basic metronome settings, which again you can find in the handout in the description. The first is on the downbeat, like before. The second is on the third partial of the triplet, and the third is on the second partial of the triplet. I did that because it's a little easier to do the third partial first and then do the second partial last. So let's look at the same exercise we just did with the duple rhythmic combinations and now do them with the triple rhythmic combinations. Now remember to think about the composite rhythms and ask yourself, what rhythms are created now in this subdivision? Now, here's all 7 rhythmic combinations with the metronome on the third partial of the triplet. So again, like before, if adding space in this new ternary subdivision is challenging, we can play all of the triplets in the beat and then play each of the 7 rhythmic combinations as accents. And this comes in handy especially with the second partial of the triplet, and that's because most Western music in a triplet subdivision tends to play the second partial of the triplet less. So it's important to get really comfortable with that part of the beat as well. So I'll demonstrate that now. Sometimes it can seem like an exercise that we're practicing is particularly difficult, and in this case you might feel that way. But in reality, this isn't difficult. It's just something new and something that we're not familiar with. We haven't done it before. How many times can you think of something that was difficult initially and now is second nature? So the more that you practice these, the more familiar you'll become with them, and hopefully the more confident you'll be to play accurately within the subdivisions. So practice these exercises slowly, gradually increase the tempo, and gradually become more comfortable with them. So in the next video, we'll look at how we could apply all of these exercises to the drum set. So I'll see you then.